to be able to interact with you as well today.
Thank you so much.
Dave and Bob together on another APEC very soon. So we'll have to contact him and get that going because get a full roster up. Also have Sal on there and a couple more, right? So be good. And finally, Jeremiah.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Later. Bob, I don't know if we can switch gears now that Dave's out of the equation.
Hold on, do you want to go just back a little bit? You can show the structure. You're almost at the right place. Just go back a little. No, there. That's it. So if you go and download the presentation, when you don't have it underexposed, you see the full sphere ball from the edge of that tube. But with this massively underexposed, you see the internal torus and the tube that feeds it, the electrons from the copper oxide in the inside from photoelectric effect.
Okay.
And every so often you see a little flash in that video, and that is launching and going into the anode and leaving these toroid impact marks on the anode sheath. So we know what the internal structure is from the impact marks. We know it is this torus of torus structure. We know that it has this non-radiating boundary, but it's not fully spun up. And what I think it is it gets to a point where it gets so spun up that it literally chops its own umbilical cord and launches into the anode.
And it's just amazing.
And it's directional.
You have this here.
Yes.
In a 1979 NASA paper talking about UFO and stuff. It's just amazing how long they've known a lot of this stuff for.
It's criminal.
Yeah, we've been teleporting stuff for like 30 years now.
Davis, 2003 published ball lightning study when he was commissioned by the US Air Force in October 2001 to find out anyone in the world that knew anything about ball lightning or related technology. He comes back with two principal things. One, the work that was born out of the study of John Hutchison's material, the Ken Shoulders exotic vacuum objects, as one way forward to understand ball lightning. And the other one is the US Air Force classified under the clause of space and aerospace, a ball lightning study, to understand ball lightning, the space and aerospace classified work that was done by the US Air Force in the 1950s and 1960s, which they still don't mention anything about in that ball lightning study by Eric W. Davis of warp drive metrics. You can go and look at it. It's on the Black Vault, warp drive metrics. Eric Davis ball lightning study. I think is Jeremy frozen.
No, I'm just deep. I'm deep in thought about all this. And I wish that you had like more links to this stuff because I'm watching.
You can find it. Just go to Ball Lightning Study, Eric W. Davis.
I'm watching a video of a projector. I want to find the original video and watch this. And
you can download the presentation off remoteview.icu. You can physically get the actual PPT with the video embedded.
Man.
Here, the slides here.
Yes, slides downloaded from there.
Boom. Yeah. Awesome. This is what I was looking for. This is great. Okay.
Yeah, download presentation.
Let's get the presentation slides.
Taurus and a Taurus.
You want to look at it in PowerPoint rather than in Google.
Awesome. Michael Perone will be joining us in about a half hour.
Awesome.
Download anyway, I guess.
Yeah. It's not. I haven't put any bugs in there. I don't do that. I'm not playing games with people. It is what I presented.
Maybe
why is my computer mining crypto?
It's all an evil plan to get a few extra cryptocurrency.
I gotta go to an app store. Hold up, it's opening this application. Hold up, it's doing it.
All right. It's PowerPoint. So,
side note, who do you guys think could produce an engine strong enough to power like an accelerator? Do you think Boeing or Rolls Royce might do that? we have to talk to.
NASA have already done a study, and you can see it. You can find it on using plasmoids, which are these things, and firing them out of the back of a plasmoid generator for propulsion for space use.
Rough skate. All right. I have to find this.
I don't like NASA though, man.
No, we're not going to do that.
I want to make my own particle accelerator and shoot it at Bernie's multiple layered deep dimensional toroid, or however we refer to it scientifically.
Yeah.
There he is.
There he is.
Scientifically, it is the bagel coil.
Bagel coil. I want to shoot a particle accelerator or bagel coil and see if we can break the fabric of space-time. I'm starting to believe.
Or we contact
guys.
Bob Lazar that supposedly has a particle accelerator in his yard that he made, and then use that to do it. And there you go. There's the perfect ratio one.
There's your fractal phantom toroid. And
so when we're talking about the 48 divisions, go to the first slide.
Here's a piece of metal from Hutchison.
Yeah, so there's 4 quantization levels there, and I'm only referring to 3, and each one is the substructure of the level above. Go to the top slide, the opening slide, the first slide, that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I gave a presentation in 2016 in Constigliani di Asti in Italy to the Condensed Matter Nuclear Science group. And I used a different part of this structure, this stellate, rather. It's 2,800 years old or something, right? And it was the Maltese cross that was around the neck of the Syrian god. Why did I use that? It's because that was in the center of the shield of the Order of Electrical Engineers from the 1880s in the UK. And I thought, why did they choose that? And I went and found out that the Maltese cross is the symbol of God-controlled power. And I thought that was appropriate to put on the cover side. That was the first non-scientific physical evidence that I'd used in any presentation. Now, when I discovered this structure on the John Hutchison sample from 2017, if you go down, I realized it was 48 divisions. And then in the back of my head, I thought, oh my God, that kind of disky thing that's at the top of that stele also had something that looked visually about that. It has 23 and there's one broken off. But if you did a full circle, it would be 48. Okay. And then I thought, well, what the hell is this structure then? So I went onto the British Museum's website to find out what it was, because it's in the British Museum. And I went there to take this beautiful picture. And at the time, it's been slightly changed since. It described this disc here as the flying disc of the sky gods.
Cool.
Then I thought, hold on a minute. It looks about the right kind of divisions as the alien reproduction vehicle, so-called. It has 48 capacitor arrays. And what I didn't know until we started modeling these in 3D is that you can maybe fit up to 51, but to have the fields with their double layer not interact, 48 is the maximum. And it produces the maximum stability. The gravity waves are trapped inside, according to the concepts of the other guy that I talk. I have a video of him in this presentation talking later, called John Archibald Wheeler. So, and basically where you look whether the toroid of the toroid fits on the rake angle of the ARV, the safe zone where the people will sit is within the safe zone of the Vesica Pisces. And it's the only place you can have a biological entity. And you also can't have the biological entity in the center, because that is where the flux of neutrino waves go through, and that would cause decay of your carbon-14 in your body to nitrogen-14. It would smash up your DNA. And it's a very sweet spot. If you move slightly out of that safe zone in the ARV, basically your matter would just go. And so there was some guy at a Tesla conference after I said this some time ago, and he says he was brought in because he was a Tesla coil winding generator expert. And he said they were brought in because some of the field generators that they used on the ARVs were failing, and they would end up with the passengers turned to mush because the central point that goes through is not balanced. And the way you operate it is very, very simple, and it matches exactly the control method that's described. On each of the 48 capacitor banks, I think you've got 8 individual capacitor plates. And by changing the phase angle on those, you shift the toroidal moment, so you vector in different directions. It's incredibly simple. It completely lines up with what the ancients called the flying disc of the sky gods.
So it's like a steering wheel. Then is that what you're saying? Is that we can figure out how to?
You've got a phase relationship, and that changes your phase singularity and the flux of the gravity wave through the core of the center, as described by John Archibald Wheeler in the phrase that the section I have in this presentation of him talking.
Can you leave that back? Go back one, Jeremy, to that. So where's the safe zone? It's not in the middle, you said.
No,
so
the safe zone is like where you've got the arrow on the basic paper from Geverblis in his
those little
1995 paper. It's kind of a roundabout where the two loops meet on the top and the arrow comes out. That's basically the safe zone. And the ARV has its rake angle such that it's able to influence the phase relationship on the substructures of the 48 substructures. It's really rather trivial. I said to a particular person who knows John Hutchison very well recently, I think we know how to build a replica of the ARV, and so, you know, and anyone following the work will know implicitly that this is just fairly trivial, and because it creates this separate space-time bubble, you can go in multi-mediums. It doesn't matter whether you're underwater, in the air, or in space. It will travel essentially just as fast. Because in local space-time, you have basically the same flux of relic neutrinos, on this boundary, it doesn't matter what you're interacting with. It just goes through it. It's not important, and so look, you kind of need to. If you look at the ARV, it basically has a diving bell with standard air seals, and so all you need is oxygen, but you don't need anything to go through the atmosphere, because the spun up structure, when these structures will spin up, they will go through, like, you won't see it, then it'll go low frequency red, and then it will go through greens and yellows and blues, and then it'll go to UV, and then it'll disappear. Like, so that's how these things will appear as they're spinning up the non-radiating boundary.
Interesting. Yeah, so I mean, it seems like it's really just all about geometry.
Those chairs are, according to the sacred geometry. It's not approximate. It's exactly there. And that is the only option in this structure. Now, you will have some problems possibly with experiencing time and consciousness. And so the way you get around that is to generate your own relic neutrinos, so you have a local consciousness. It's like having an offline hard drive storing your data. You're not affected. You're not connected to the whole conscious field. But it could very well be for you in that space-time, once you've used up the ether in that local space-time, you start to lose conscious, and you literally not only lose perception of time, everything freezes. So when you see in your so-called disappearing plane thing, let's assume that happened.
Okay.
What it does is, because what is time? It's the relative change of things. What causes a chemical reaction? Well, it's an interaction between electrons, between something being oxidized and not yet oxidized. Well, if you change the way an electron can behave, you stop the chemical reaction instantly, right? And that's exactly what happens inside this structure. So when you put this structure, as it's changing that epsilon zero, the ability of the electrons to do a chemical reaction stop. And that goes for a signal going in your brain, producing toroidal moments in your brain, and a signal that's causing your heart to move. But you don't die. Time just freezes.
I think Einstein would argue, though, we just have a different frame of reference at that point, right? Unless those systems
the time is progressing very, very slowly, and to you, perceptively, it's not moving at all. So basically, it doesn't actually matter with this technology whether it takes you 10 trillion years to get to the other side of the universe, or you get there in 5 milliseconds, because for you have one blink of an eye and it's effectively you've teleported. The rest of the, Sol might have gone into a supernova by then, or a red giant. Doesn't matter. For you, you've literally done a blink of an eye. So it doesn't matter whether you're going fast or slow. The time will stop for you.
Yeah. The scary part, though, is there'd still be a time dilation effect on the outside, though, right? So you're going to show up in the future.
Normal time travels relative to the local time based on the gravitational flux of the relic neutrino condensate through the matter. So you basically, like, let's say if you were using this technology on Earth, you could go into this device and sit in there for 20 years and come out and you wouldn't be any older.
Yeah. But everybody you knew would be 20 years older. That's the downside.
Everyone you knew would have aged. They would have progressed through with time at 20 years.
So this is weird because it reminds me of the whole Nazi bell and it was called originally Project Kronos, I believe, which is time.
Oh, well, I didn't know that, but of course that's why
Project
you
Kronos,
could park people in there. They could live forever, effectively. They're not. they'd have the same normal lifetime.
So Hitler could be
I
inside
was
of
going
a
to say,
bell.
is he still alive somewhere? Yeah.
Didn't
Guys,
they
we gotta go
his
find
body
Hitler.
or something?
I don't know. Is that verified or not? I don't know.
Jeez.
It's not like we had DNA testing back then, or maybe we did.
But it's crazy. You mentioned the perovskites. It says that one of the perovskites was barium titanate, which we know is was written on the board in the 1950s by the Bonson Labs experiments with Thomas Townsend Brown.
I didn't know that, but I rest my case.
So they were into this stuff back then. A number of people visited that lab and that archival footage, including Bryce and Cecil Dewitt, who were they were the team that ran the secret Chapel Hill anti-gravity conference for the government, where Richard Feynman attended under the pseudonym Mr. Smith.
Sorry, hold it, stop there. Magnetohydrodynamics, vortex, anti-vortex under the center with a flux going through the center. That's exactly the structure I've derived from physical experiment. Literally on that image that you see there, I've not seen before. What is that image?
That is...
Yeah, we need to Google that.
What is that from? I think that's actually from Brown.
It's actually Thomas Townsend Brown's... Oh, I rest my
Thomas
case.
Townsend Brown.
I don't need to see anymore.
So...
Bob's ready to go deliberate. The jury's ready.
Yeah,
I think we're long past that.
It's real, we've decided.
Dean Rickles did a great history, and he also did an awesome interview with Lewis Witten, who worked on. He was part of another gravity group that was trying to researching all this amazing stuff. It goes into the whole history. He's of course the father of Ed Witten, who's one of the founders of string theory and a giant and considered a god feared by many, like including Eric Weinstein. Said there's one of the few people in physics that I fear, and that's Ed Witten. So yeah, Lewis Witten. Check out
this guy is the guy that did what you just showed on the other presentation or whatever it was you just had up.
Yeah. This is the guy that Dean Rickles. He was there behind the scenes and wrote this whole paper about the history of this conference, which was basically classified and not well talked about.
To me, we're chewing the fat over something that's obviously implicitly true. Right. And it should be obvious to anyone. Right? I've just seen that image for the first time, and it's literally saying magnetohydrodynamics, and it's literally got exactly the vortex, antex, vortex with the flux loop thing going through the center. There you go. There, done.
Yeah, it's try.
That's exactly what you show. I show multiple times in my presentation.
Ballistic electrode, incandescent cathode, the circulator pump that circulates this ion plasma around this toroid.
You know what that is? It's charge separation with hydrodynamic shear or magnetohydrodynamic shear. Literally, I specifically say magnetohydrodynamic shear, right? And there you go. Everything is on that page. Who made that presentation? Is that you or what?
I put this presentation together. Right. I've shared this a lot on Twitter and other places. This is my summary of basically I put everything in here that I find that I link stuff together. I'm gonna actually try to butcher your presentation if you don't mind.
Oh well, it's free to use with credit, of course. But
this is great. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely. I'm gonna link back to the source. I'm very careful and good about that because it's always important. You just show people, I got this from legitimate scientists working on legitimate experiments.
There you go. Hold on. Go up to the slide above. The one that you just had.
Yeah.
That one. Magnetohydrodynamic vortex there. That is it. That's what they've got their space shot based on.
Right. It's these geometries which
there's only one solution in the universe, and it's literally in your face.
Yeah, it is.
Like if you want the answer to how to do anti-gravity, or I would call it propulsion, it's in your face. Everyone has a perfect manifestation of this in their face.
Yeah. Okay. So this was great. Lewis Witten, oral history. He was interviewed by Dean Rickles and Donald Salisbury. This is great. Lewis Witten says that he was recruited by Lockheed Martin Company. All right, so this was this was Glenn L. Martin Company. This was back in the original days.
Was Lockheed Martin, huh?
In 1949, Witten was hired by them to work on remote control drones. in 1940, like 47, 49. So like when Roswell was happening, this guy was working for Glenn Martin Company.
Well, Nikola Tesla himself had made remote control, like boats, submarines, all sorts of stuff.
He also said in his 1911 interview in the New York Sun newspaper, using the application of this principle, we will create a flying machine the world has never hitherto seen before, which will have no screw propellers or control surfaces, but will be able to carry any weight and fly in any weather at fantastic speeds. Amazing. That's in Sun, New York, 1911.
Damn.
Guys, if you just tuned in, we're here with Bob Greenyer. He's from the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project on YouTube. I'm, of course, the alien scientist here on YouTube. We're here with Bernie, the crypto alchemist, and, of course, Ashton Forbes. So if you just tuned in, this is the panel. We had Mike Rossi on, Dave Rossi on here earlier with a number of other people that couldn't join. Unfortunately, we're trying to get John. We were trying to get John Hutchinson on here, but I don't know if this.
I just emailed him again, so we'll see. And I saw he just posted a couple of videos on his own channel, so I commented there. I was like, "Hey, Bob, check your email." So, or Bob,
yeah,
John. Thank you, Bob,
yeah.
being here. And I'm just gonna run upstairs, get some boiling water to put some salt in, and then I'm actually gonna hook one of those triple coils into just a 5-volt electrolysis reaction, so we can see that, and that's what will be between Bert and Ernie there.
Yeah.
But well, just only 5 volts. I think we'll be fine that way. We won't destroy the world or open a chain reaction of.
Yeah, we don't want to open any vortexes to the interdimensional, portals before Christmas.
I want
to see Bernie disappear
and
appear like in our future, just as we're about to meet our maker. Then we know what happened.
Right.
Now, you can tell your kids that this is how Santa gets around to all those houses in a single night.
Oh, that's the plan.
So
must be teleporting.
That's it.
I just want to open the portal to the nether dimension and have the demons come out and then play out the movie The Mist in real life, except for the end scene. I don't know if you guys seen that movie. It's really dark.
But you bring that up, though. There's always the rumors of like the demons in the red, in this infrared, and then like the aura and like in the ultraviolet sort of thing. But then it's like the human visible light spectrum is literally infrared, from infrared to ultraviolet, and then you have like 97% of the rest of the EM wave out there, light wave out there. And then Jack Sarfati talking of the red-blue shift. Bob, can I get and him saying that had to do with warp and stuff? Do you have an opinion on the red-blue and what the red-blue shift is in regards to any of this, Bob? Or
so what I can say is, if you go to the 2018 Sochi presentation by the guy that leads the cold nuclear transmutation and ball lightning weekly meetings and at semi-annual conferences, Zatalepin, he talks on the physics of rotational bodies or something. It's on the MFMP's website. So if you type in rotational bodies and Zatalepin, it shows that in both natural ball lightning and in artificially synthesized ball lightning, it's spinning so fast you get a red shift on one side and a blue shift on the other. Right,
just so like we saw in Ashton's videos there, right? And it was forming that yin yang. I think.
Okay.
Like
no,
that.
Well, I mean, the structure that I see in is the same thing as the Aalto, Finland University spin orientation in the synthesis of a topological monopole, right? And so the difference you change, it's actually like a mushroom cap. And that is when the spin inversion occurs after the monopole in the center of the overall topological monopole. And if you did a slice through that, it would be the Finnish Ukonofasara, the Thor's hammer. And that's the bit that does the changing, in my view, of epsilon zero, the space-time dielectric metric. Okay, so that does the magic, and that's what you would always have at the front of the structure. And there's a gravitational beam that goes all the way through, because the relic neutrinos, they can be interacted with by gravity, and they according to Bob McElrath of CERN Theory Group in 2010, they are the model of gravity that is supported by the standard model, right? So the relic neutrinos go through, but because they can be pulled through and anti-pulled through, depending on the spin, they can go through, whereas the ordinary matter and the baryonic matter and the electrons get trapped at the phase singularity. Okay, so that is where the core, magnetic core of the monopole is. And so this gravitational beam that goes through, on which they are traveling but also propelling themselves, when you're doing that, making the plane disappear, it doesn't matter which orientation they're in. Okay, if you listen very carefully to exactly what is said in this presentation by John Archibald Wheeler, it's only when you link their gravitational waves that they then pull together. And what that does, when you get the three orbs, and you need three because only three defines a plane, right? If you have two, you only define a line. And because you need the azimuth of the three to go precisely and perpendicularly through the center of the three, you have to have three, because then you can control.
A fourth to do the volume to.
I don't know about the fourth. It's not necessary. You create a macro cluster, and you use the same technology that you use to move the individual ones to move the collective fractal that's on the level above that you've just synthesized. So what you would do is you would have phase conjugation beams, which is just 180 degrees out of phase electromagnetic waves, as per Tom Bearden, which I actually have that also in the presentation, Tom Bearden talking about that. So it's 180 degrees out of phase. You can look at his Oblivion book or his Third Lance book. He describes it very clearly. And then when you have the phase conjugation beams, let's say from your satellite or from your ground-based stations, you then cross those beams, and that causes scalar wave interferometry. And at the interferometry, you basically have a node that you can move around as fast as you can move around the two beams by orienting them from the satellite or ground-based stations. And because they are scalar waves, they can interact with the orbs, because only scalar and vector potentials can penetrate the outside, right, and interact with it. They can energize it and cause it to be on a node between the interferometry crossing point. Okay, and it's all clearly described in Tom Bearden's book. To me, it took like 5 or 6 years to understand what Tom Bearden was going on about, right? And he'd been writing this since the 1980s, right? But I only got the book, I think, when did I first get a Tom Bearden book? It was in mid-2017. Someone said, this sort of stuff looks a bit like what Tom Bearden's talking about. I go, who's Tom Bearden? So, yeah, so that's what you need. And then if you listen to what John Archibald Wheeler says, is you need to get those to, when you've got the azimuth going through the center of the body of the plane, and it's directly perpendicular to the plane that's described by the three tors, you then need to arrange the tors so the gravitational waves link up, and that will create a new gravitational vector through the center of the plane. That will pull the tors in, which will increase the gravitational vector, which will pull the tors in further, and it's literally like that. When you link those up, it's an inevitable level, and it will go to the next fractal level. And at the same point, it will switch off the chemical reactions. It'll switch off everything, because you're changing the way the electrons behave, and electrons are everything that causes oxidation, right?
I feel like
so
just real quick on that. So the direction of travel, how are we? It feels like, are they being pulled backwards in this? Like, it almost looks like when you look at it, it's being pulled backwards. So you're creating that plane, right?
You would need to track the relative positions per frame of the video that's taking this. Now, I don't know. So, for instance, so I think some people criticized it because they said, oh, it looks like the outside of the plane has been cut and pasted in a few frames. But that's because they're not looking at P and B frames, which is ways of encoding video information from your iframes, right? Your keyframes. If this was pure iframe, you wouldn't see that. But when a P and B frame is, they look at either the previous frame and look at things that change and only change the things that change, right? And I think the P frames do a predictive between the two and look forward to the next iframe and estimate where it needs to change. So you need to understand video encoding to deal with some of the more how should we put this? less informed understanding of encoding information.
And I'm not really concerned about the debunkers because they're not going to believe no matter what.
I had
anyway,
a history of doing video editing and video encoding and trying.
The science part is the part I'm interested in, though, because what you just described there. I have a quick side question before you move on to the next part. Right? So first of all, I want to know: do you think the orbs are then attracted to one another? Because it seems like the first orb looks for it, and then the other ones are just sucking right onto it.
Listen what happened. Well, listen exactly what is said by John Archer.
Yes, it's a perfect 120-degree triangle too.
Of course, it will be, because that's how you. If you look at some of the structures that we physically see in our experiments, they equidistantly space themselves out. There is a triangular hole in the Mars cavitation structure, with a sphere in each of the center where the corners are. Like, this is a vortex structure, but it's actually got a triangular hole cut into the steel, right? Mm-hmm. And we also have a triangular structure and a four structure and a 2 structure and a 5 structure and a 6 structure and an 8 structure. And they always equidistantly, because these structures, they repel each other and attract each other, right? So they're automatically self-organizing. So when you get one in there, it doesn't really know where to go because it has to be complexly controlled. So the satellite will be tracking the plane, which is easy to do. This was invented a very long time ago. You know exactly its vector of travel. And then you bring in your structure, and you're basically seeking to get within the operating distance of the traveling device, right? Yeah. And then what you need to do is bring in the next one. And when the next one comes in, they will start to influence each other. So you've got a little bit more complexity to work out. When you get the third, they basically snap into position, right, based on their field of attraction. And you can see this in our experiments when you see these things traveling through the plasma chamber. They don't influence each other at all. And in fact, there's one beautiful experiment we've got. If you go and look at extreme interactions, we have a discharge going through the chamber, and one structure comes out. It then goes anti the magnetic field, hits the cathode, which is the metal on the bottom. It then comes around the opposite direction, and as it's orbiting around the electric discharge, another one comes out, and it then starts orbiting around the original one. And then another one comes out, and you have 3 of them orbiting around their center of mass. Exactly what you see here, we physically done an experiment before I ever saw this video, right? And these are these structures, okay? It's not in this presentation, Jeremy. It's in it's extreme interactions. You can go and find it on my blog. But anyway, So you've muted yourself, Jeremy.
Sorry. In the presentation, though, you show 48, and this one it's more simplified with like 2 or 3 or 4.
2 is the minimum, because you can't link a gravitational wave if you don't have one pointing in the other direction. So the first ability that you can make the next fractal up is to have 2, right? So if you go to the previous slide, you can see the top left example is one of these structures manifesting. And when you have 2 or 3, it produces a Paisley, which is a particular vortex ratio spiral that goes into the center. We see these in Hutchison samples as well. You see the 3-order structure there still actually has a Paisley. Okay, it has this vortex like quote mark, right?
Now,
hole in the middle. Go back to the 4-order one. The 4-order one down there. Right now, on the left, you see the non-radiating boundary, the spherical structure in which there is no electromagnetic waves propagating. Now imagine that, and I've actually got it on my laptop right now, and it's going to be my next presentation. But if you can imagine that overall structure is the same as each of the 4 structures in the structure you see on the right, they would have their own non-radiating boundary. And what happens is if you go back to the previous slide, when you have 3, the non-radiating boundary does not interact with each other, so you still get the Paisley. But when you get 4, the swastika or the salvestica, depending on it, whether it's making or destroying, right? The destruction zone on the fractal overall top level goes inside the non-radiating boundary of the subtor. And so you end up with a freaking square hole. And that is the first one that you don't end up with this vortex structure going in. It's still got a vortex, but it's contained because one feeds the next one. But you do not need that level to implement this technology. You only need 3. And you need 3 because you can't work out the normal of a plane from two structures. You need 3. It's the minimum to be able to effectively deploy this technology, right?
So deploying the technology in those orbs, are those orbs physical craft or objects, or are they satellite projections?
No, they're not. They're just the same as ball lightning.
They're like ball lightning, EVO.
Yeah, and they have a gravitational wave that travels through the center. And you look at John.
Are those? Can you project those from
yes,
like remotely?
You can generate them, you project them, and then you control them exactly as I've described, in my opinion, which is you produce scalar waves from phase conjugation of 180 degrees out of phase electromagnetic waves. And that can be a traveling of waves. So you can push and pull it forward and back. But because it might want to skip off that beam line, you then have two or more crossing the beams. And the crossing of the beams allows you to have interferometry. And that allows you to precisely locate the core. And because it's scalar waves, it can penetrate into the toroidal moment structure.
That would tell me then that things are being released like pretty quickly. Then they're not stuff that's floating around and then they're locking in later on. Like these
no, you make it almost instantaneously. So if you look at one of the methods for injecting plasma into thermonuclear fusion reactors, it's called a plasmac, and a plasmac is in fact actually a similar structure to this. It's just not over energized to the point at which it reaches the non-radiating boundary structure. It's just it has a toroidal moment, and they inject the toroidal plasma in, and it's a way of putting the plasma in and adding plasma to a tokamak, for instance. Okay, so all these things were developed in the 50s. I mean, it's like, and you have to expect them to be pretty stupid not to have worked out how to do it since. I mean, there would have to be idiots with a big budget and not able to do anything competently.
After they made the first laser, and they made the second laser, the first thing they did is cross the beams and see what happens.
Well, of course, and you know what happens? You produce terahertz radiation in the beat frequency, and that was used in a cold fusion experiment that I saw in University of Missouri in ICCF 18. By Dennis Letts and Dennis Cravens, because there's no real easy way to create terahertz waves, because they are the wave that is the phonon distance between matter. So if you want to get a de Broglie wave that actually allows scalar interaction with the nuclei, you need waves at this frequency. But they did it by having two slightly off frequency lasers to create a beat frequency between it. And it was actually proposed by a guy called Lowe in 1973 that you could use lasers to create coherent matter and fusion. So it's not a new idea.
So I'll have to get that. You have 20. You have some of the new ICCFs. That's the International Conference on Cold.
Yeah, I'm referring to ICCF
18.
18.
I was
Dennis Letts and Dennis Cravens used the beat frequency between two lasers to stimulate fusion.
So people can go to coldfusionnow.org, and there's an archive on that site that has it doesn't have ICCF 21 or 22, but I'll try to get those.
You can go to lena-canner.org, and you can probably go there now. lena-canner.org. It's run by Jed Rothwell.
Canner.
CANR. CANR. N for Nelly, not Cabba. N for Nelly. Nelly the elephant went to town.
Yeah, I don't know why I did that. All right. Oh, this is cool.
So if you go into the enhanced by Google up the top right there of the page, and you type in ICCF 18, you might get the full.
I can't hear you right now. Sorry, I'm live and. Sorry. You want to jump on? You can. I was trying to. Sorry, I didn't catch any of that because two people were talking at once. So
okay, go to the top right, enhanced by Google, and type in there ICCF 18 on the page. To the right of Lena Canner. Okay. There, type in ICCF 18 -18. Well, that might work as well. They tend to put it ICCF.
I know. I did an exclamation point.
And hopefully you'll find.
So you have everything on your website, huh?
This is not our website. This is Jed Rothwell's.
Oh, sorry.
But we we have scraped this whole database as well, so it's in our Lena database as well.
Awesome. Yeah, this is amazing stuff, and I'm glad that these conferences took place and they kept going. I went in 2014 to the one that they had at MIT. Mm-hmm. And I covered that one. I don't know if you've seen any of those lectures, but those are still up. I was able
Larry Forsley, there he is.
Yeah, he's the U.S. Navy SPAWAR guy.
He's the guy that's forcing everyone to consider this as condensed. What do they call it? What they're trying to get everyone to think of it as a lattice confined fusion. This is so that
LENR, right?
No, they're trying to call it lattice confined fusion because in my view, this is my stated view, and I'm going to state it right here. It's difficult to discover that this is ball lightning, and then you don't get to all of the magic technologies.
It's all about the terminology, huh? Whatever you call it, right? I feel like a lot of scientists and academics care so much about the terminology.
Well, it's how they compartmentalize it and use the algorithms to control it, right?
Mm. These day and age, I think you have to know how the system works as well, just to even get information out.
Oh, I'm sure they'll call all this pseudoscience, and I think there's a lot of pseudoscience that's mixed in with this too.
There's something like 70 different theories, and probably at least 69 of them are wrong.
Yeah.
All fun games till you teleport a Coke bottle to the next room.
And
it gets real serious.
I mean, I like.
Although we're not advertising Coke, are we? Coke.
No, I mean, equal opportunity. Pepsi, you get a little shout out too. Maybe
and don't forget No Name Brand.
RC Cola, you got it.
Roller Cola.
So who came up with that hydroton model of the? I think it was Edmund Storms came up with that. That if you take that chain and
actually, you know what happened? I was talking about a particular presentation about Ken Shoulders, Evos, and ball lightning, and the day after or 2 days after, Melvin Miles asked the MFMP, and I give permission to access the archive in one zip of Ken Shoulders' works. And within 8 hours, Edmund Storms had also requested for the archive of Ken Shoulders' work. And then about 9 months transpired, the US Navy representatives started publishing disinformation about EVOs are nothing more than Coulombic explosions, or they're nothing more than shape charges in ICCF 22 and 23. And I asked the US Navy to retract those. And then I would write a section of a book on cold fusion for the person that's writing the book on cold fusion, if he got his former colleagues to retract those 2 disinformation pieces, which they have not retracted. But Edmund Storms, right here, who worked for Los Alamos National Laboratory, came out on Lena Forum to say that he actually probably does believe now that exotic vacuum objects are what is going on in cold fusion, right? And I have full respect, because actually in 2010, when Ken Shoulders had that interview with John Hutchison, filmed by Nancy Lazarian, his wife, that he said that the only person in cold fusion he respected was Edmund Storms, because at least he was a real scientist. And he's come round after all these years to accepting. But he said specifically the group at SPAWAR have published that they're seeing neutrons, but they're not seeing neutrons, right? It's not real neutrons. These are fake neutrons. The Russians call them, what do they call them? I think they actually call them fake neutrons or pseudo neutrons. But they are these clusters that can act a bit like neutrons, and they can produce triple tracks in CR39 detectors, and they can fool a boron 10 detector. But you know what? They do not use indium or gold activation in the NASA work, and they do not use bubble detectors. And these are the only types of detections for neutrons that are reliable and can't be fooled electrodynamically by these clusters, which was identified in 1995 by Matsumoto and told to the cold fusion community. And I've directly confronted the SPAWAR group on this, even to their face in one conference. They don't want to hear it, because Ken Shoulders says they published along a line, and because all their historical publishing is saying we saw neutrons, they have to keep going, and they've got patents, and they have to keep going in this line, because if they suddenly admit, like Edmund Storms has come out with the courage to say it probably is a natural phenomena like ball lightning, which is the exotic vacuum objects, and they have to basically rubbish all of their patents. And I know, sadly, Pam Mosier-Boss, who worked with Larry Forsley, they fought for years to get the patent through on the US Patent Office. Years and years. I sat down with her, and actually in ICCF 18 in that room there for years, and not that room, a different room. Actually.
No, it was a different room. That's
14, is it?
You weren't there.
Yeah. Anyway, for years, And I sat down with her, and she walked through all of the struggles that you have. You got the triple tracks there, actually. I see there on that above. There you go. That's the triple tracks there. Cold fusion evidence. That's in. You basically have a neutron coming in. It hits a carbon atom and produces 3 alpha particles. But the point is, these clusters are chunks of alpha particles anyway. So, like, and this was shown by S.V. Adamenko. He produced these structures which had something like 455 AMU. Right, which is like not any element in our near universe. Okay, and when these things blow up, they throw out a load of packets of alpha particles. So, like, it's a bit weird. It's like and they've already verified the S.V. Adamenko work. They brought it in 2015 to America. $4 million appeared out of nowhere. So they set up this thing called Proton Scientific. It was verified between 2015 and 2017, and then it became part of the National Nuclear Fusion Program. And they took down the Proton Scientific website after moving the entire lab from the old isotopic factory outside of Kiev in Ukraine and verifying it. Yeah. And this experiment, it was using the old Soviet method from the 1950s of nuclear synthesis, artificial nuclear synthesis. And he set up the lab, and he started experimenting in 2001. It worked the first time, and he had 10,000 experiments sequentially in a line that worked 100% of the time. And he had all of the samples from the impacts, and he challenged anyone in the world to come and check. And the US did. And it's
question for you on the same lines, Bob. So a lot of people in UFOlogy, I've learned, are saying that a lot of the stuff they're seeing, orbs, whatever, are human made. Do you think that would account for the more and more sightings we've seen over the years as well? Thank you, Benedict.
So at this time of year, you should see more of these type of phenomena. So I'm just specifically talking about between December the 10th and December the 14th, when there is a lens alignment between Betelgeuse, the Earth, and the black hole, so-called thing at the center of our universe. And this increases the relic flux. And in fact, we had our first successful experiment on December the 12th. And it wasn't until I looked at Joe Parr's work from the 1980s or something, 90s, that he identified this time in the year when there was the celestial and black hole and alignment that allowed for this increased flux of relic neutrinos. Although he didn't attribute to relic neutrinos, but that's what happens. And so, sorry, what was the question again?
So it's really about just like the frequency of these sightings of these UAPs.
So what happens when you've got
some of them ours? And that's what we're seeing more. Go ahead.
So relic neutrinos do not ordinarily leave the sun. Okay, because they haven't got the escape velocity. They don't travel fast enough to escape the sun's velocity. But when you have certain things like a big sunspot or whatever, or a coronal mass ejection, they can have an increased flux that comes out. And at those points, you get interactions with the atmosphere, likely, that would lead to an increased level of sighting. So it's like partly based on space weather. It's based on these auspicious, yes, it's the phase of the moon, and yes, it's the alignment of the stars and the asteroids and whatever. These things really do matter in this space. And I never ever mocked these kind of beliefs that ancient people had, but I wasn't actively thinking they had any value. And now I've had to learn to eat a lot of humble pie about things like crystals, about things like meditation and the lotus position and the humming and everything. All of these things that I thought was a little bit woo-woo, and really I'm just a scientist and I'm looking at things under the microscope, and that's true. And I know that that's true. But these things that these ancient people said and these symbols they used, I've had to eat a lot of humble pie, really, because they knew their stuff. And so it is about circumstance. So if there are a lot more sightings and they're natural. So for instance, in Hestalen in Norway, that was one of the areas in the world that produced the most long-lived luminous objects in the sky. And they could be from a couple of tens of centimeters across to the size of a house. And there was a whole period, I think, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, where you would have very, very regular every summer. And I've identified that during the summer in Norway is when you have the peak humidity. So the carrying capacity of water vapor in the air is at peak when you see most of these structures in the air. Now, what they've identified is it's a mining area. They produce like copper and zinc and lead, and I don't know. There's a whole range of elements. I might have got those wrong, but essentially there is a sulfurous stream that runs down, and so the whole valley is basically like a freaking big battery with electrostatic potential. Okay, you have that with the humidity in the air, and you have also quartz in the ground, and you have thermal shifting between the summer and the winter, and you get all of the environments for creating this natural effect. However, as the mining has changed and the sulfur nature of the river has changed, you then start to maybe get a lot loss in these ball lightning structures. And so there are natural processes that produce these. Now, when you're looking at somewhere like Area 51 or somewhere like this, and you see a lot of these glowing balls running around in the sky, or remote distant areas where you might have a base that would be a great place to do these things, okay, they might be man-made. And so, like, I think the majority of luminous objects that are seen in the sky are natural phenomena, right? But what if we're to believe sorry, you've gone silent. You muted. Sorry, Ashton, you're muted.
Sorry, I just I hit your microphone.
So I was muted. Yeah, so just even if they're natural, right? Like the issue is like that doesn't explain why you'd see more over time. So I guess my question is like from what I've learned even just today, but you know, going back to it, that we might have unlocked this stuff 30, 40, 50 years ago, or even before that. Like, do you think it makes sense that we would see more and more over the last 80 years because countries are figuring it out? They're building their drones that are using this type of technology.
Do you think we're having a bad year in fires in the California?
I moved away from California, so I couldn't say.
Okay, but the reality is, I think if I'm right in saying this,
variables
is the lowest number of fires in California in a long period of time.
Yeah.
But you have a factor of there being a lot more people on the planet. So if you go back to let's say when I was born, 1972. What was there in the planet? 2-3 billion. There's now 8-9 billion. I don't know, but like it's hard to catch up, right? So firstly, you got more people. Then who could afford a camera? There's almost no one that could afford a camera. Then who could afford to disseminate their experience? Almost no one. There wasn't a means for dissemination of experience. And then who are keenly aggregating
just ridicule.
And who is aggregating this information and giving it, amplifying it? Now there are people that spend their life scraping every single section of the internet and personal and whatever for anything that even closely looks like this. So it's not necessarily that the incidence has increased. It's that the ability of them to be packaged into units of information and spread widely has increased.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, just early today, I was doing what you were just mentioning. I was just scraping the internet, found this LAX video of these, like, it looks like 3 perhaps distinct orbs that, not like the MH370 videos, because it looks like an actual physical structure, not necessarily like a non-radiating barrier, but still really interesting because it makes me wonder, like, okay, is this, you know, I'm just going to speak freely here. Are these like China's orbs and they're spying on Air Force One? Are these our orbs that we're using to defend the plane? Or is this just really a balloon? Like,
you have to ask the questions with the Foo Fighters, because the Foo Fighters never did anything. They just followed planes. They just followed planes. Were they an intimidation tactic of a technology that no one really knew how to use during the Second World War? Right?
Yeah.
I don't think they were alien. I think they were early implementations of this technology. And I think after the Second World War, these things were started to look at as practical defense technologies. And that is what I think my father showed me in 1979 when I was 7 years old.
How? Because, you know,
it's scary because it's so old. Go ahead.
You need to cross 2 laser beams to sort of create...
No, you don't need to cross 2 laser beams. You need to cross 2 electromagnetic waves, which in them have phase conjugation of 280 degrees out of phase electromagnetic waves. So you don't need to see these things. They can be microwaves, they could be gigahertz, they could be...
The Klystron was invented in 37.
Yeah, the Klystron is a trigger for a nuclear weapon.
So if you had... Yeah, but it was also used to detect submarines too.
Okay.
We need material science, though, to pull it off, right? I mean, you know, getting 2 matter waves or any waves in the sync, that's the difficult part, right?
What they had with 1940s technology
produces these structures.
I'm just trying to think back to 1940s technology and what they had to be able to produce Foo Fighters. If you know,
that's the hardest part I have to get through, right?
Oh, you mean in 1940s?
Europe.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, so in 1930, what was it? 1932, you have the electrical particles of matter drawings. If you go to our Facebook, you'll be able to find the drawings from Tesla if you don't know where else to get it. So that was 1932. You have his claim that he could do this, basically what would describe as an anti-gravity craft in 1911. You don't think that these people were not researching this. If you look at the 1903 designed Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, it literally has phase conjugation waves above the top mirror with a toroid in the center where the crossing of the beams are, right? And below that, it has a yin-yang, making a yin-yang, making a yin-yang, a wheel within a wheel within a wheel, with the golden ratio sacred geometry structure defining the windows of the Supreme Court that was designed in 1903. So the idea that this wasn't known, and in Tesla's 1935 press photo for the New York Times, when he was promoting the weapon to end all wars, and he says the energy for this comes from a surprising source, right? It creates an invisible Chinese wall, i.e. chi, as in light.
Oh, lost him.
Hey, where'd he go?
Government took him down. Said peace.
Oh my God, dude, he's too much close to the truth, dude.
Yeah, a little too close. Flew a little close, too close to the sun on that one.
Every time. Disconnect.
Wow.
Bob, hopefully you're still there.
What's your guys'
I wanted to ask
like?
him about this whole vortex tubes kind of stuff. I wanted to ask him about the thunderstorm generator, Malcolm Bendall. Yeah. I want to show my friends patents and sort of give that away. I don't know if he's ready.
Do you think they could deploy this from a submarine, or do you think like a satellite or like a plane?
He was mentioning both satellites and dishes, and essentially, right? If you have the satellite above the microwave or antenna array from an island or from a base close.
What about on a ship?
Yeah, ship definitely. That's what they have with their Aegis. Their shield, right? This missile shield potentially could be.
So that's how you could point it at the thing you wanted to go to, maybe? Interesting.
The laser-based weapons experiment?
This is the guy I wanted to show, man. The work of Luigi Giovanni Valiero Rota in 1886 to 1951 is when he died. He built friggin' electric planes, man, and back in like early 1900s. And really some interesting work.
Yeah, I really feel like this has been suppressed for a long time, potentially. I mean, that's the part that scares me the most, especially when we were talking to Bob about the technology, and he's talking about we might have this in the 40s. I'm like, so that was 90 years ago. So we've been hiding this kind of technology for 90 years. Like, lots
of technology, man. If you notice one thing about the UFO narrative, everything they've put in front of Congress, everything they've put out in the mainstream, all of it's been completely absent of the real science and the technology. And the people in the channels that are talking about it, few and far between. We have trolls in the chat saying this is all bullshit and these people don't know what they're talking about constantly. And you also have no coverage of it whatsoever. We're the most, like, we're shadow banned to all hell. My channel has 115,000 subscribers. And we barely like crack the viewership that there's channels with less than 10,000 subscribers, new channels that are getting way like more views than that. And the channel it doesn't reach. People complain that, hey, I ring the bell, I've subscribed to your channel, I don't get notifications, I don't know when you're going live. I have to go and search my subscriptions to find your videos. Like the YouTube algorithms running operations behind the scenes. Twitter was caught doing the same kind of thing when it was under its old ownership. Now that it's under the new ownership, we've got some freedom of speech on that platform. YouTube is not the best with it. It's unfortunately.
So Facebook literally made me deleted on its own over 100 of my first videos that I ever posted because I had www.alienscientist.com in the descriptions. It was like, this goes against community guidelines.
Yeah.
I got ahead of the game. I deleted my Facebook preemptively.
And it's interesting that what did get in front of Congress at these congressional hearings on UFOs was stuff from a guy who's promoted a hoaxer as a scientist and been out in the mainstream promoting nothing but hoaxes. And then they could put all that stuff in front of Congress, debunk it all. and then say like, oh, this is all nonsense. It's like people don't see the dog and pony show and that's been played for them in front of the public. I've been screaming this for years now that like this is not like, this is a fake. Everything you see down there in that city, Washington, D.C. is fake. It's faker than any science, like any pseudoscientist on the internet right now.
Jeremy, I'll give you a very specific example. And sorry, my battery probably gave you a breather from my battery.
I want to get into. I have more questions too.
A specific example on the censorship. On I think March the 20th, 2020, I produced a video on using EGCG in green tea to prevent colds and flus. The reason being that a University of Florida study in 2017 had shown that if you just drink green tea, you have a 30% reduction in respiratory conditions, right? Just green tea, right? Then if you have zinc, they've done studies, I think in 2000s or early 2010s, where if you have zinc and you have a ionophore, that you can decrease massively the viral replication in cells, in vitro and in vivo, okay? And so I published this with the references, okay? Almost no views. Then about a year and a half later, this suddenly became, it's suddenly gone through that mean knowledge where everyone started thinking that you can have a zinc ionophore and zinc, and it would reduce your path of the progression of a respiratory condition. And what happened is it went from like 1 or 2 views every other day to maybe to a week to it literally went up vertically. In 2 days, it went up vertically and it had like 4,000 views like in 1.5 days. And the line, when you look at it, it was just straight up. It's like someone had drawn the line wrong on the YouTube chart. And then immediately I got YouTube saying, you've broken YouTube's community guidelines and we are suspending this video. And I'm thinking, it's been up for a year and a half and now I've broken the guidelines. And you know what happened? I wrote to them and said, this is based on current operation science that's published in peer-reviewed journals. There is no justification for bringing this down. And you know what? They reinstated it. Yeah. And it's barely had a view in the year and a half since.
Well,
yeah, you mess with the pharma companies, man. That's what happens, you know.
I'm gonna get banned. This video just got banned and flagged for uncensored just for mentioning that. But by the way, we're not giving anyone health advice. There's no health advice being given.
I didn't give any health advice, and I didn't refer to any remedies for a particular condition.
He has to say that legally, so he doesn't get context. Real quick, alien scientist, Jeremy. I think the thing too, I want to just echo what you mentioned earlier is that we have these congressional hearings, right? And what's all the headlines? Oh, alien bodies or whatever. Like, where are the headlines on the science, the fabric of reality breaking science that's being hidden from us, right? Like, they don't ever talk about the technology side of it.
Ashton,
it's all just crafts.
Scraps to sate the masses.
Yeah, exactly.
The hilarious point about it, scraps is already in the public record from 1979. It's like, it's just a freaking joke.
Yeah, that's crazy. This is a 1979 NASA document. And it's right
you
there.
Read it. It literally says everything they've been revealing in these congressional testimonies.
They've not revealed anything yet. Jake Matt, thanks for the $5 super chat. The TR-3B, those lights, according to Ed, those were actually thrusters or rocket engines. That he said the inside accelerator ring only reduced 85% of the ship's weight, and the rest had to be pushed around with these rocket engines. So those lights, I believe, were actually
they could be a fractal toroidal structure inside those spheres as a controlled plasma, and you can vector them in the same way that the orbs are being in Ashton's videos, right?
And that was my videos, huh? The world's videos, Bob.
Personally, well done. You're an excellent CG artist. Well done, Ashton.
Some people think that, though. Some people think I made them.
Yeah. Okay. The videos that Ashton had found from 2014 that he's given airtime to. The point is that you can vector those individual orbs, but it's the same reason you have 3 on the MH370. Why? Because that defines a vector of travel through the 3 points. Mm-hmm. It's the minimum. If you only have 2, it's like if I point in a different direction, I always end up spinning.
That's why I think it's getting pulled back, because like you said, it's defining a vector, it's creating a plane in two-dimensional space, right?
Yeah.
So then it makes me wonder, like, okay, is the direction of travel going to be, perpendicular to that, reverse of that? And in the video, especially the drone video, you can see like the tail of the plane sticking out from the center of the singularity. And it makes me wonder, it looks like it's getting yanked backwards a little bit. And that's why I like Dave's idea of there being a fourth orb where it's getting pulled back. I don't know if it's required based on what you've said, but that's why I've been asking you coyly about, how you would control some type of propulsion like this. Would you just turn off the electrons feeding it, right?
The way you witness the smaller quanta being controlled when they were being brought towards the plane. It's not complicated. It's like I've got a car and then I bolt three cars together and I'm moving the whole lot together, but I'm only using the same kind of internal combustion engine. It's using the same mechanism to move them around as you did the quanta below.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool.
Not complicated.
So because your way of thinking would have me think, okay, you can move it anywhere you want, right? You have full control over it, just like they have the orbs. Like the way Dave and Sal have talked about it makes me think more of like the rubber band, where it's like you got to have something ready to go, and then you just let it go, and that's where it's going to show up. So that's what I've been trying to unify.
The fourth potentially it could also be 6, right? 3 and 3.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, definitely.
I actually think that's more likely of the two, but it's totally unnecessary.
Yeah. So okay.
Hey Bob, it's Gerald here. Speaking of unnecessary,
Hello,
I was going to ask you the 3 vectors that are surrounding it. Could you actually, would it be possible to have 12?
You can have up to 48, but it's pointless. Like if you want to make your job harder and control 12 rather than 3, but 2 will not do the job. 3 will do the job. You do not need 4.
But wouldn't 12 give you more of a finer control?
No.
No? Okay, fair enough.
No, because you've statistically got a lot more problems with having 12. When it comes to the alien reproduction vehicle and the flying disc of the sky gods, right? 48 is optimal, as you don't get any bleed out of the gravitational waves locally. You still get the gravitational vector through the center, but you don't have, with 48, their non-radiating boundaries push and pull against each other so that they don't try and collapse the object that's inside. You know what I mean? It's already a stable toroid.
I have to bring up Ed Lead Scallan's flywheel is actually that 48, 24 and 24, right? 24 positive north, 24 south. It's 48.
Okay, well that would make sense, but okay, well there you go.
But now if you have your surrounding vectors, there's say 12 around your toroid, it's going in one direction as the center of your toroid is going in the absolute opposite direction. So wouldn't that give you more of a control than it would?
No. So you need to think about when you make the fractal toroid at the fractal level above, you have to rotate the subtoroids at 90 degrees. It's just how electrodynamics works. Okay, they have to be at 90 degrees, the curl and stuff. So,
I got that.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, no, I understood that. I meant that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's only when you link those gravitational waves together do you get the gravitational vector through the center, and that will pull those in. And it's exactly what you see on the video, and it's what you, and they will pull in to the point at which their fields are attracting and repelling. They're likes. They likes, the same as Feynman used to describe. It's a self-organizing principle where they like to attract each other to the distance at which another force that's embedded in them causes them to repel. And they will know that creating those particular structures at a certain quantization scale, when they put it in there, it will create a safe bubble I would argue that it's in the Vesica Pisces, okay, in that structure, that then is safe to move because the charge and inertia and mass is negated inside the overall spherical structure. And then you can move that structure in exactly the same way in any vector you like. And I look at this from the point of view of something that I saw when I was 7 years old. I saw it in the sky. I can see what they can do. They can instantaneously change direction. So I don't have the mental problem that people can't move these things around. And it's just like if you've got a laser pointer, and it's not a laser, but let's say you've got a laser pointer, I'm able to move that around and make the cat chase it around instantaneously. And the further the thing is away from me, the faster I can move it over a distance with a set of servos on my controller, right? So if I'm up in space and I'm at a few hundred kilometers up, I can move my servo just a fraction of a micron, and it's already moved 1,000 miles on Earth. You know what I mean? And once you've locked the center, the topological monopole structure with the phase conjugated scalar waves and the interferometry, and you just move those two vectors around, it's literally instantaneous. So teleportation, perceptually teleportation, and it's as fast as you can move those servos to control the controlling cross beams.
With teleportation, would you not need
no, it's not teleportation. It would appear to the people inside that it's teleportation, and effectively to anyone that's experiencing something instantaneously appear, the field structure breaking down, and it just goes on the ground, right? It looks like it teleported there, but it's actually being moved in a relative time space. Like it's moved 2,000 miles in 1 millisecond. So from your point of view, you've literally gone through one frame in your eye, and it wasn't there, and now it is. Right. So for you, perceptually, it's teleported. For the people on the plane, it's teleported. No one felt any inertia, and it's gone from point A to point B. In all real senses, it's teleported. In practical sense.
So from somebody's point, I'm sorry. Well, from somebody's point of reference on the outside of your teleportation, would it not seem like you just disappeared?
Of course it would, yeah. You unappear from one point in space and you reappear from another point in space. The only point that you see the transition is where you're going through the formation of the super tor above, the fractal toroid above. And that's exactly what you see on the video. I had no choice but to engage with this topic. I had literally, it was a former director, Matthew Villatt of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, said, "Have you seen this?" And I looked at it and go, "Oh, well, I know what that is." It was like, I was very matter of fact about it because it shows everything that's necessary. And all I had to do to describe it was to use five slides or something from this presentation that I'd already given before this became public through the good effort of Ashton.
Yeah, and I think that the thing about it that I've learned is that it's somewhat simple. I mean, yes, it's complex if you think about it, if you don't have any background for it, but when you just think about it in terms of breaking down the empty vacuum state of space-time, you know, like our reality is some type of a projection, and I think the double slit experiment proves that straight up, because we know that there is some capability of non-locality, and now all we're trying to do is figure out, you know, how do we cause it? And in this case, you can think of what's happening here is like riding a wave, right? The plane's riding this wave, and it's doing so on another, if you want to think of it as dimension, so to speak, but it's able to do so where it can, from their perspective, move faster than the speed of light. And yeah, it would just then look like it's disappearing, right? And going to reappear somewhere else.
The other thing is that along those lines is the concept of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Because the size of an atom is relative to the charges that can express themselves in ordinary charge levels that we observe. So if you can imagine a neutron star, it's like a teaspoon of the neutron star, like may weigh as much as our sun, right? And all that's happened is the electrons have come from being outside of a so-called nucleus and inside a thing making all the protons into neutrons that weren't already neutrons, right? And so if you have something that changes the dielectric constant of the physical vacuum in the nucleus, then the electrons and everything can shrink down. You still have an atom, but it's in its own space-time. It's still within our universe reality, but inside that space-time, you have a bubble where electric charges are represented differently because you've changed epsilon zero. And so you can literally shrink that plane. Now, if you take the Earth and you put it into a black hole, and the Schwarzschild radius, it's 8.7 millimeters across. So how big is that plane going to be? Not very big.
The problem with that, though, is then, like, you know, you've got people on board this plane, right? And I'm just going to go ahead, since we're talking about this, I want to give...
You have to think about the people and the plane as information. And the information is represented in a stable state in space-time, which we perceive in our epsilon zero, our dielectric constant of the vacuum. Now, inside this bubble, you're changing that relationship. They're still the same atoms. They're still in the same exact orientation, but you've shrunk them. This is Alice down the rabbit hole. right?
So
this is literally
saying,
going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is their frame of reference wouldn't even change from their point of view.
No, they would.
That's what I'm
they
hearing
would
too.
see themselves exactly the same. They'd be on their iPads or whatever it was back in 2014. They'd be talking to each other, going, "What's that smell of bromine? Oh God, whatever it is." They wouldn't experience. But what they would do is, once they're fully in that state, they might have a stop of time. Now, from their point of view, they don't ever perceive the stop of time. They just, at one point, they're over the Andaman Sea, and the next moment, they're wherever they ended up, whether that be in another planet far, far away, or somewhere else that we might like to mention, Chagos Islands.
Interesting.
And it would happen so quick for them, the brain wouldn't even be able to comprehend the speed.
You would not perceive time.
Yeah.
So this is basically just an Aquaberry drive, right?
You go and look at the study of T.L. Carr. The T.L. Carr was, I think he knew the doorman of Tesla, and they ended up creating this supposed anti-gravity craft. And there was this guy who visited them called, what's his name?
Otis T. Carr.
Otis T. Carr, but there was a guy who's got like fluffy hair, and he met him and he put his hand into the aluminum. What? Ralph Ring, yes. Ring. So Ralph Ring said that they went in this device and they said, look, we're going to go down range. And they went down range and they told everyone to get some rocks and put them in their pocket. And they went back up range and they had no concept that they'd actually traveled. The guy said, can you now look in your pockets? And there's the rocks that are not here. They're only available down range. And so they had no perception of time change. And it might have been that they got out of this bubble and they were still in the sphere of influence of the non-radiating boundary. So their time was still stopped there. So they're like almost in a, they're almost like tripping. They have no long-term memory because they can't lay down the long-term memory because, in my view, long-term memory is dumped by the toroidal moments in the vortex and the anti-vortex in your brain that produces the toroidal moment. It dumps it into the basically the real cloud before they came up with this fake rubbish they call the cloud, which is the coherent condensate related neutrinos through the entire universe. So they have no ability to dump long-term memories. Okay. And so when they come back and they find rocks in the pocket that are not available in the local environment, they must have traveled downrange. And they even say that the device is controlled by consciousness. And that's, you literally become part of this other conscious entity, which is the craft that you're controlling.
Like being in a dream state, essentially.
Yeah. It's like being in a dream and you can't for damn remember what the dream was.
So why does the orb have this heat signature on it? Is it self-sufficient then at that point? If you think there's no mass inside, because to me when I look at it, I feel like there's got to be some mass inside this non-radiating barrier.
So if you go to my presentation, Jeremy Reese, there's a point where you've got like a single bar thermal extraction. Okay, so it's on the Shakh-Paranoff Mobius strip, a bit higher than that. In the presentation, it's higher. Higher. No, higher. It's much higher up in the presentation. It's like one of the early slides describing the principles. There, the Shack Pack. No. Down. It's there. Slide 11. There. No, up. 11. That. You've got the yin on the one side, and it's extracting energy in a sphere at a distance. The yin is less bright in the center of the phase singularity. Why? Because it's fusing matter. Okay. And if you get two deuterons and fuse them together, you get 25 million electron volts. The yang is destroying matter. It's always brighter because it's unraveling the energy. It's not the energy gain from a lower distortion of space-time that is what you get out of fusion. You're literally unraveling all of the energy, the trap light that's in those baryonic and electron matter. Okay. And it produces a flash, an intense flash of light, but it also projects out. So you get a luminous object at a distance. So this is one way that you could create these particular objects, but it's not really a very controlled way. You want to create them from a soliton. But what I'm showing you there is that these structures can actually thermally extract energy from a distance. Now, it might be that that flash you see is actually the projected effect from this self-organization of those three tors into a super tor above, a fractal tor above. And the flash is actually slightly behind that of the dark area where it's thermally extracting energy.
And what is this? What is this burning? Is this like it looks like magnesium burning or something? What is going on here in the picture? What are we looking at? And what was done in this Shakh-Paranoff generator experiment here? Like how do it because it was this and what is the photography? Was it done with like a high-speed camera? You know, making sure like
Yeah,
is it just exploding bits that like jumped a real long distance in a short
so on the luminous object you'll see that it has subfractal lobes on it. Can you see those? You can see in that where next to the word luminous you actually have these hemisphere structures on the overall sphere, right? And they note this. And that is to do with the spherical organization because they form a crystal type lattice structure, which you can see in the patent by Lockheed Martin. Okay. But if you go to the next slide, slide 12, you can see the exact same Penrose staircase diagram, which is a demonstration of what the phase singularity is. And on the right, you see a Mobius strip, which has the same phase singularity. It depends which way you go round, whether it's a yin or a yang. And so what the Shakparanov research did is they created a pseudo monopole by first treating these single electrode, because it's a Mobius strip, with RF. So they treated the environment to excite the environment, and then they hit it with two contacts either side of the single wire, because it's a single wire because it goes twice very round. And the reason as it goes round, if you go to the slide above, you can see the NVIDIA Tesla simulation of down there, right? That is the copper strip, and what you're seeing in the blown up section there is a simulation, a computer simulation of the propagation of the charge separation of the positive charge and the negative charge on the copper as it's propagating around the structure. And what you're seeing there is positive space charge, vortex and anti-vortex, and negative space charge, vortex and anti-vortex, and that sets up the space-time charge space charge system that when you hit it, and it's in the process of doing it at that point, you hit it, it produces this phase singularity, and that produces the topological monopole. So what I'm saying is I'm suggesting to you is happening when you see that black flash. That is thermal energy that is captured from the single bar thermal extraction as described in the Lockheed Martin patent. Okay, it says one of the applications is single bar thermal extraction, and it's extracting that energy, and it's going to be behind the direction of travel of the new fractal tor that's just been produced. Okay, and so that produces a shock wave of cold, and it's sucking the energy out of that environment, and that is part of the way that's allowing it to propel itself, right? So if you go in my presentation further up, Jeremy.
So you think it's cold because it's sucking the energy out of...
No, actually go to slide 8. That's quite a good one. These structures, so that's your image there, Jeremy, of a laser, green laser cutting through a smoke soliton. You can see that in these cases it sucks things in from behind. Right. You can see on the two solitons making a fractal soliton structure. It's sucking at that impact. What you're seeing in that right hand 2017 water nanobubbles is two solitons on top of each other. The white areas are where gas that's dissolved in the liquid becomes nanobubbles, and the light is reflecting off the interface between the water and the gas. Okay, how is it possible that you have that heart-shaped structure, or that kind of leaf-shaped structure, where everything has got bubbles? That's because you have matter going into two singularity points on the yin and the yang, right? And it's literally a flat structure. That it's not actually like a mushroom. That is actually two solitons overlaid at the golden ratio on the sacred geometry structure. That produces a torsion beam which has a lower pressure that fires out behind it, and it sucks also energy in, and that's what you're seeing in that little flash of stuff behind. So even though it's going forward down to the bottom left, and even though your one, Jeremy, is going to the top left, right, it actually is stretching and changing the space-time in front of it, meaning it has effectively a lower pressure in front, and behind it's kind of sucking things in, which it's feeding itself. It's weird because it's feeding stuff from behind that's propelling it forward. It's really weird to think about it. But
so you think it's moving forward in that situation, but even though it looks like it's going backward because of that's where no.
I think the propagation of the cold wave is going backwards, because you have an intense coldness. And so what we find is in our experiment, like in the lion experiment, the original lion experiment, the temperature was about 850 degrees. He turned it off and he attached a 30 watt, 20 watt light bulb, and it lit for 30 minutes, and immediately heard this crackling sound, and air was being sucked in to the tube. And when you look at the temperature, it went from 850 degrees to nearly minus 273 degrees centigrade in 2 seconds. And that's because these clusters, which we identified, and you can see the marks of them on slide, where is it? Slide 15. If you go down to slide 15, Jeremy, that is the accretion disk in the butterfly wings. And in the center, you've got a black hole. That is where the matter has collapsed. And you've got the torsion beam coming out down the bottom. Okay? And that is where the energy is sucked in and spun in behind it. In the one on the right, that's HHO gas from Hiroshima Masa on tungsten for about 2 or 3 seconds. And it produces that magnet. Both of those are magnetohydrodynamic structures, you'll say. And the one on the right, you can see where the sphere is. And when you go to the last slide, I love this slide. Go to the last slide, Jeremy, and make it full screen.
The last slide in the presentation?
Not the last slide, the third to last slide, 42. Of course, the answer's on 42. It would be. Right. Go full screen. Can you go and just play that? Because I want to show you playing the animation.
How do we do?
Play in the top middle, kind of to the left there, that one. Right. Oh, is it going to play it? Oh, you've got it in a different view mode. It's going to be showing on a different screen for you. Okay, stop sharing. Yeah, no, you have to quit out. Go to the X on the
I'll be right back. I'm going to get a drink, guys.
Yeah, no worries. I need to do another interview in a little while.
You'll have to do another presentation on this.
Okay, can you click on your image, the alien scientist image on the bottom there? Can you click it and try and get it to play the video that's embedded? Click it. Up there, go on the white area and click. Press play. Right, now, that's your image. Oh, is it going to play it? Yes, okay, that's the sacred... No, just let it play. It's got about a 3-second delay between. That's the sacred geometry on your slightly distorted structure. That is a golden ratio. That is literally the Tesla logo in exactly and correctly the right place on the 1914 patent. Now, look at this. Where we are ripping tungsten apart, that circle with the carbon film coming off, and this is also a topological monopole, that exact circle of what is synthesized strontium from the tungsten with the carbon film coming off, wait for it. It'll go round in a second. Wait for it. That is exactly where the secondary takeoff of Tesla's patent is. And now in 2 days before I gave that presentation, I thought that has to be significant. That is the point of destruction of matter or synthesis of matter or projection of energy. I looked at his 1914 patent. You could bring it up if you choose, but it says something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing here. If you move that secondary takeoff a few fractions of an inch down, it will create a ball of plasma, which has fantastic destruction capability, and it destroy the apparatus. I'm not a time traveler. I did not go back in time and tell Tesla to put that in his 1914 awarded patent for the Tesla Wardenclyffe Tower. And if you draw on the non-radiating boundary, it's above head height, and in fact, it's above the second floor windows in the Tesla's tower. So there would have been no interactions with humans with this weird area that would have caused problems for biological entities. And Tesla's logo is more accurate than the real Iconovasara from, which is Thor's hammer, Thor being the god of ball lightning and thunder and lightning, right? Like you literally could not make this up. All history supports this standard magnetohydrodynamic understanding. All of history, all of the classified patents from the Soviet Union, all of the classified patents and work from the US. It is what it is. And every time anyone comes to the conclusion that it's ball lightning, like this guy did in 1993, they changed the rules of the American Nuclear Society to prevent him from publishing. When Ken Shoulders realized it was ball lightning, a person from Los Alamos National Laboratory demanded that the curator, Jed Rothwell of LeonardCanada.org, remove his papers from the database. And I never heard of this person or Ken Shoulders until I started understanding this was ball lightning in 2017. Never heard of it.
Interesting. I wonder what I have Michael here just joined. He's our material scientist.
Hi, Michael. Lab. How you doing?
we were trying to. We haven't had any direct experience trying to replicate any of the Hutchison effect stuff or any of these EVO experiments or even cold fusion stuff in our lab just yet. But if we were to try to do that, like where would you suggest we start? I mean,
okay, so I would recommend.
I have a question as well. I missed. I'm sorry, I was working with a vacuum furnace, so I just got in here. What was this thing about a Lockheed Martin patent for environmental energy extraction?
It's called Systems and Methods for Generating Coherent Matter Wave. It uses without credit the method of generating electron solitons of Ken shoulders, and then it employs the Aharonov bomb effect that was used effectively by the person that informed on trying to understand Ken Shoulders' work, John Hutchison's work, and that was the work of Winston Bostic, who from 1948 worked on Project Sherwood, which was Los Alamos and Princeton University and one other location with converting the hydrogen bomb into domestic fusion. And so they say one of the applications of the coherent matter wave, which can be produced at any temperature, even using fermions, using this technology and this approach, one of the applications is single bar thermal extraction, which means you have everything at the same temperature, and from that volume of exactly the same temperature, you can actually extract thermal photons, right, and bring them to a new location. And that is the zone that you see in the Shak-Parahof work.
I'm sure I lost the page with the patent on that. I'm trying to bring it back up.
I've got a link within my presentation, so you can just click on that.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it's using the Aharonov bomb effect.
At the phase singularity, it's using the Aharonov bomb effect to get things in phase and appropriately apportion the energy distribution between them.
So how does this phase difference allow you to push the energy around exactly?
Okay, so what's a Saser?
What's that?
What's a Saser? It's a sound laser. It's what they use in these active denial effects, which actually produces these terrible things, which actually, because of the piezo nature of your tendons and your teeth.
That's a heat pump. That's not negentropic or anything.
Wait. What's a laser? A laser is the same photon energy, so it's got the same wavelength, and it's in phase, right? Okay. What a maser is a microwave photon in phase, okay, and same energy. What a coherent matter wave is, let's say we take the preferred element of, after many years of research, of Nikola Tesla for producing his etheric matter streams. He chose aluminium. Aluminium has one isotope, 27. So already you're onto a winner. Now, if you give that the same energy, i.e. every single aluminium atom is exactly the same energy, its de Broglie wavelength description means the wavelength is exactly the same for the matter wave. And then what you have to do to make a coherent matter wave is you need to get those same energy de Broglie wavelengths, descriptions of the matter, into phase. And the way you can only do that is the Aharonov bomb effect. And at the center of a fractal toroidal structure, you get it for free.
So what is the Aharonov bomb effect doing to get these?
It's allowing these things to get into phase without messing around with their energy level in a negative way. It's very well described in the.
It's not directly affecting the Hamiltonians of the particles. It's just shifting phases. I see. Okay, that's interesting.
This is the pattern, and it's all well described in there. And from this pattern, I learned the one most important thing. You do not need to cool matter down to near absolute zero to create coherent matter. The reason they did that is because that is the easiest way. You have a substrate, and you take the cesium-133 atoms, or you take your sodium-23 atoms, or whatever, that single matter wave function, but they're all at different temperatures, so they cannot cohere. You then lower that down to absolute zero, and they're on a substrate so that their energy levels are almost exactly the same, which means their wave function, de Broglie wave function description is almost exactly the same. And it's just like pendulums on a suspended support. If they're all out of phase, after a while, they always end in phase. Yeah. Okay. That's how you create your normal Bose-Einstein condensate that they did in 1995, 6 or 7 or whenever it was first made, after being predicted for so long by Bose and Einstein. The difference is with this is you can take fermionic matter, you can create bosons from that by creating, for instance, like a Cooper pair out of electrons, or dimers where your nuclei is not already fermionic nuclei, bosonic nuclei. And then once you do that, you can then get them all at the same temperature. And what they're doing here in this, they're using this 10 micron with many coupled microcavities to allow the bouncing around so they get at the same energy level. And then they use the magnetic field to act the Aharonov bomb effect. And that allows for these things that are at the exact same energy to become in phase. So you get coherent matter waves. And that comes out as a beam. And that actually has far more punch than any laser will ever have, right? So I think a lot of these weapons, the next generation weapons that they're putting on aircraft carriers and planes, they call them lasers, but they're not. They're matter wave.
How big do you think this device would have to be? Pretty small?
We produce matter wave in our Vega experiments, and it's caused by a little crack in the brass plate.
So tiny is the answer.
We produce it probably out of a structure where the core of the structure is maybe 40 microns across. Look at the scale of their device for creating a coherent matter wave. The actual length of the longest length of the body is 10 microns.
Do you think the number of cavities matters on that device right there?
What?
Do you think the number of cavities has to be specific, like we see here in this image?
Well, you can look at our actual SEMs, and the answer is already in the SEMs, because nature has already given the perfect environment for it to be generating these coherent matter waves. You can literally look at our SEMs and you can see the spacing. So what is it? It's in our particular device, I think a spin wave and an anti-spin wave is over 400. Is it over 400 microns? Or is it over 40 microns? Anyway, you can go and see in our SEMs. The answer's already there from nature, literally writing on a piece of brass what the answer is. Now, there could be quantizations above or quantizations below, but you don't have any. There's no necessity for maths. There's no necessity for other theories. It doesn't matter what's going on. Nature's giving you the answer because we see the coherent matter waves and you can see what produced them. That's it. The answer's already there physically.
So the coherent matter waves are not the same thing as EVOs, though, right?
Well, arguably, the EVO itself is a coherent structure, and if it's traveling, it's a soliton, which is a trapped wave, and it's coherent matter and traveling in a wave. So it can become a coherent matter wave, but actually, the coherent matter waves.
It's not like any of the standard atoms, though. Also, these are the mathematical description comes out of the Lenert equations for these, I believe.
You know what? I swore to my readers and my viewers I would never use an equation. I broke that when the Russians sent me the Zverblis paper for having thrown in the towel, right? I said, look, I need to understand this without a single equation so every person on earth can understand this implicitly. And then I realized it's in your face. So it's like, it's literally the design of your face. The answer is always in the mirror.
Well, I mean, this is a somewhat more technical.
People can do the maths later. You can ascribe all kinds of mathematical equations that fit this, and there might be 20 different mathematical equations that give you the answer. But you need to look.
You were referring to space charge, though, so I figured.
Yes, I am. Yes,
and
that is
so about the geometry in this, can this be related to any fundamental constants or anything like that in nature?
Jeremy, before we do that, I'd like to get this nailed down here. So, the people who mainly looked at space charge were, I believe, Evans, Greenyer, and Lenert, and they had a lot of interesting concepts. I don't know if they're all correct, but I mean, if you generate space charges, those are the guys to look at, I imagine. So the coherent matter waves are one thing. The EVOs are
can also be coherent matter waves, but actually, what you get, if you look, go to slide 23. Okay, so you get a coherent matter wave that can come out of a collapsing structure like a reentrant jet from a normal cavitation bowl. As it collapses, it forces the coherent matter wave through the center, and it comes out as normally two structures, right? But it depends, because you can have coherent matter waves that come out of the substructures. So typically it's almost always two. So look on the left, that's two. So when the overall matter structure collapses and you actually get a flash, you get two orbiting around each other. Okay. Sometimes you can have three, sometimes you can have four, but the likelihood of it being more it comes down to how stable it was on the resonant phenomena that generated the structure. Okay, so what it kind of does, it can package the information into a certain quanta, and it can keep loading information in there, and energy in there, and you get more substructures of substructures forming up until you get 48, and it has to either blow up or it has to become the next fractal up, and so it scales and grows like that. But depending on the substructures, depends on, like, if you go and look at the videos on the coherent matter wave beams that we sometimes have, weirdly, just a tube, which I would see is just a traveling Evo. There's only one or two examples of that. Most of the examples are two that orbit around their center of mass, right? And often they have a white zone, and then they have something that is orbiting. It is orbiting around, but you only see it when it's coming into the ions or electrons in the plasma chamber. And what I mean by that is one is a positive structure and one is a negative structure, or they are spin or alternate spin structures. And when one interacts directly to produce the glowing plasma and the other one doesn't, but it pushes a bow wave in front of it. So you only see it when it's coming towards the camera, but not when it's going away. It's a little bit weird. So you can see that on our videos. Okay. We've seen some collapse wave functions of these things, and we end up with like a little bullet as it's dumping the matter that was entrained in it, and you have these orbiting things going around it. And sometimes you see it actually interacting with the material and making these multiple spiral changes in the spin of the atoms of the material, which allows you to see them when you put polarized light on a microscope. You don't see anything, and you put polarized light, and you suddenly these tracks appear. Because it's affected the spin of the nuclei in the matter. It's just reorganized their spin, not the actual matter. It's a bit weird, but it's because of the intense localized magnetic field, and it just travels through and affects the matter as it travels through. Yeah. Interesting.
So, again, how does this relate to taking thermal energy from the environment? So how do you use only phase to create a temperature difference in an otherwise initially thermalized?
So what is thermal energy? Well, it's phonons vibration in matter, typically at terahertz frequency if it's in IR range. Now, you've obviously got different frequencies which are not thermal. In fact, most of vibrations in the universe are not in the thermal IR range, right? So if you can have a system that can either change basically it appears to have, if you go back to the model, the 3D model. Okay. Can you see? Okay, so can you see the little spot that's on the Sothic ratio cone that comes out the bottom? So you've got the two order on the left. Okay, that's the spot there. That is the spot where it seems to do freaking magic, and that is where you get on the overall structure, you get like the focus of the beams that interact with dark matter, and the dark matter has two things it can interact with: gravity and electrons. And electrons are the means by which any thermal energy can be moved around, if you know what I mean. Like you can only have vibration when one particle is moving here and its charge is repelling this, and like then it bounces back. So like it's because of the electrons that you have transfer of energy, kinetic energy, between anything in any frequency, okay, within ordinary matter. And so my understanding is that little spot there is able to extract not so much the actual thermal energy from the device, it extracts the chi. And the chi is the structure that keeps the balance between the flux of the chi that goes through the atom and keeps the electrons where they ordinarily are and stops them from being overexcited. And you can go and see this on Where is the Atom Battery? I think it's a paper by a Dubna research scientist called Alexander Shishkin, who actually works with, unfortunately, Dubovik, who's nearly completely lost his mind through dementia. But anyway, they say that the atom keeps its electrons in particular because of this dark matter fractal toroidal structure that's in there ordinarily. And this is the etheric matter that was released by Tesla in the 1800s and beyond when he did the unidirectional discharges into targets. And this is what the Soviets call and the Russians call the hidden energy within matter. And so what you're not, and when Tesla says in 1935, the energy comes from a surprising source, I don't know how much he knew about this, but he does call the invisible boundary, which is impenetrable, that this creates, an invisible Chinese wall. That's literally what he says. And nothing about what he said is not deliberate. So if you go back to my third to last slide, Jeremy. Okay. Can you see the photo with Tesla? That's the 1935 photo from his Weapon to End All Wars. And look at the sacred geometry. It exactly has the Vesica Pisces in exactly the correct place. Now, in our wormhole model on the right, if you click on that one, Jeremy, and play it. No, on the right, the brassy coloured one. The brassy coloured one. Yeah. You see the sacred geometry overlaid on that. You can see that the white ring with the black ring slightly outside of that is the only area that this magnetohydrodynamic structure affects. It has a wormhole that the matter goes into. There is literally no hole in the center of that dome. A load of material has been captured into this wormhole, and it goes through to the other side of the Vesica Pisces and gets punched through, and it literally punches a hole through, and it leaves the material. And if you go and play on the iron, which is the substrate below that brass plate at an angle, Jeremy, below that where it says Greenyer Vega pyramid. No, to the right, that one. Look at the sacred geometry, how it's deposited the brass exactly where the sacred geometry is. Exactly. Right? Now look at his Vesica Pisces flower of life pot that he has over his right shoulder, Tesla, from his 1935 Weapon to End All Wars press photo. The area that is affected only is where he's cut off the top of the flower pot. Right? He has the vortex and the anti-vortex correctly one behind the other, as I showed you in the white banana bubbles in the ultrasonic tank of Suhas Ralkar earlier on in the presentation. And it's always slightly offset, one above the other. He precisely showed in that picture that he precisely knows how nature works. And his own Wardenclyffe Tower is based on that. His anti-gravity device is based on that. His Weapon to End All Wars is based on that. And he specifically says it in the press text, this creates an invisible Chinese wall. It extracts chi, the hidden energy within matter, and it creates an impenetrable boundary out of this.
Well, I saw a slide about cold electricity as well. I think I missed that.
Yeah, go for that. Yeah, it's all very trivial. Once you understand, it's all very trivial. And so this guy here, Matsumoto, in 1995, thought he discovered a new form of electric current. And he said it was ball lightning, it travels along the wire, and when it blows up, it leaves a carbon deposit. And he says, but there's no resistance. So if you go down to cold electricity, a bit further down. There. So, no, up, that's one. So essentially, through the center of the fractal toroidal structure, firstly, Ken Scholder said you can have trillions and trillions of electrons in there, right? We know that they end up in coherent matter, and we know they end up superconducting because that's how the structure keeps itself self-organized and together without the Pauli exclusion principle making it blow apart, right? But through the center, it has this, if it's arranged so that it has a kind of an electric field, it's not necessarily electric field, but it can be guided along the wire. Now, when Tom Bearden sent a team over to 1992 to Moscow to visit people on the periphery of the Soviet energetics research work, they showed him two technologies: cold deformation of metals, where they use some kind of electromagnetic system to convert metal into a jelly, which they could push in a mold, and then they grounded it and they were able to cold mold metal. The other one was many kilowatts over very fine wires. And I wanted to put it into this presentation, but I couldn't find it in my archives. There's an early 2000s presentation where there was a TV news program in Russia where they showed this team using a Tesla coil, creating these structures, and they had an 8-micron thin copper bare wire dangling in the air, like 8 microns, and they were able to light 25 kilowatts of tungsten light bulbs from that. Okay, and that's because the wire just acts as a guide for the charge cluster, and the charge cluster, as it goes through the toroid of toroids, which is the actual filament of a tungsten filament light bulb, the magnetic field induced causes them to break up from their coherent state, and that interacts as normal electrons lighting the light bulb. It's quite trivial, actually, when you understand it. And this is Maury B. King's diagram, and what Maury B. King has inadvertently drawn there without realizing it is a fractal toroidal structure carrying the current.
I wish it was easy for me to
understand. These are effectively Tesla's DC pulses, I guess. So you have like a AC signal with a DC offset.
These are Tesla's electrical particles of matter from his 1932 beam weapon.
Okay.
So
I mean, if you look at Eric Dollar's work, there's a lot of stuff about this, and it just generally uses DC pulses. So you'll have a rise and a fall. But
so a DC pulse is a unidirectional pulse. That is exactly what Tesla used. Why? Because if you have an AC pulse, you don't have all the flow going in the one direction. Exactly. That's why you have, say, a magnetically quenched air gap. Those kind of devices, so that you only get the pulses going in one direction.
So I have a question for you then.
That's actually so key to like my own electrolysis experiments, and that I have to start doing them side by side, AC versus DC, just to show the difference of how much it really does affect.
So my question, Bob, is: Are you saying that the excess energy? Okay, so for example, the system that I'm using, I've now gotten to a point where I'm putting in 27 volts, 1.3 amps, and I'm heating a 900 watt electric element, 110 volts, for at 185 degrees Fahrenheit in 5 minutes for 35 watts.
I could give you some potential explanations. The first one is you are going to get a. So go
one more part to that before you explain that. The coil that runs the system gets colder when it's heating up the element.
Of course, it probably would do, because the coil, if you've got it configured correctly, it will do single bar thermal extraction. Okay, on sub levels. Okay, if you've got the curl on the electrodynamics correctly done.
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I believe I do anyway.
Okay, so then if you get a flux of relic neutrinos through the center and it goes through the phase singularity, and if they are unwrapped and then rewrapped somehow, I don't know what the nature of your coil is, then in theory you can take that 0.25 of an EV that's been something like that, that's been established by Parkhomov, and you can unwrap that into basically a photon that has that energy, and then you can rewrap that into, let's say, an electron. And we know that an electron, effectively, if you take a positron and electron and you collide them, they unravel, one unravels the other, and you get two photons of 511 keV coming out in opposite 180 degrees out. And this is the basis of positron emission tomography. So we know that the electron and the positron are essentially photons wrapped in opposite spin directions, right? And so this is the same of a neutrino and an anti-neutrino, okay? But there's charged leptons and uncharged leptons, and the question is, how do you get the difference between the two? But other way, it doesn't matter. You've got energy. You convert the energy into a photon, and you rewrap packets of those energy, and they come out as electrons. So that's one way that you can do that. Now, the other way is if you have baryonic matter going through the center of your coil, and that could just be environmental baryons, like that are in air or nitrogen or whatever. If the diality angle, according to David Freiberger, is exceeded at the center of the structure, or at the center of any of the fractal toroidal structures, this can unwrap the matter, and you get 930 something million electron volts of energy released. and does that collapse down into other electrons? You could have a scenario where you're converting a good proportion. I would be concerned in those environments, if you're genuinely doing that, that maybe there's some form of radiation coming off, that I would like to understand more about that. Because
I have multiple meters. I don't have a Geiger counter yet, but I have a tri-field meter, and I have a sound meter, quite a few different things put into play.
Okay, I would suggest getting some silver foil and putting it over your various detectors to try and excite any potential clusters that are coming off, and putting them into the white mode so that it can be detected. Either that or some potassium containing mica. And some Geiger counters, pancake ones, have a potassium containing mica window, and actually Ed Storm's detected these things. But anyway, the point is that I would suggest doing that. There's a guy called Russ George, and he found from cavitation experiments that he saw no radiation, and then he put different metals in front of his Geiger counter, and he suddenly started seeing radiation counts. But he worried, and he didn't know what they were, and he found that silver was the thing that produced the most peak of radiation. And then he went to Edward Teller and said, what's going on here? And Edward Teller said, well, these are what we call machinigons, which is some Jewish or Yiddish name for something that we don't really know what it is, but it exists.
That brings me to another point. After doing multiple tests with my coil system with a neodymium magnet, the nickel on the outside has been eaten off, and I took a look at it.
Well, the nickel on those neodymium magnets, depending on the humidity, I mean, the reason the nickel's on there is because the ceramic regularly falls apart in moist air. And
I would love to send it to you.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I looked at it through a microscope. It has some very interesting features, we'll just say.
Okay, well, let's have a look at it. Yeah. I mean,
I'll send you an email, and we'll see if we can hook that up. I definitely want to put that in your hands. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I have another question, and maybe Michael can answer this too, if you're there, Michael. You mentioned something to me the other day about a way to stabilize, super heavy elements using externally applied gamma fields, and that maybe just maybe. I mean, Bob Lazar describes a stable isotope of this element 115 that he had in a triangle that he could carry around with him. So it wasn't something that he had to keep in this machine that kept it stable. But you said that there might be ways to stabilize these super heavy elements and keep them stable by injecting gamma rays into them.
That's incorrect. It wasn't in a machine that kept it stable. It was stable. When you hit certain isotopes, like tantalum 180, for example, with gamma rays, they absorb those gamma rays, and the right frequency of gamma rays. They absorb the gamma rays, and due to the high nuclear spin, it's like a top. It actually prolongs decay. Yeah, look at that. Tantalum 180M is stable, even though it's technically metastable. And then tantalum 180 itself decays in 8 hours. So you synthesize tantalum 180, you hit it with gamma rays, and you can stabilize it. The same thing with super heavy elements. There's this island of stability, and none of the standard isotopes are stable, but some of the nuclear isomers are, and you generate these nuclear isomers by making these the radioactive isotopes and then hitting them with gamma rays. And then they're stable. You don't have to stabilize them with an external machine. I don't know if that's part of Bob Lazar's story or something. I haven't been paying attention to that at all. But these are also as far as I know, unrelated to EVOs.
I think you're right. It's not related to EVOs. What you have with an isomer being unstable, and this is the principle of indium activation by neutrons to detect the production of neutrons. An isomer is where you have the same baryonic matter, but it's arranged in different arrangements. So, and sometimes it's called an excited state, but actually the reality is it's just a reorganization of where the position of the nuclei are in the.
No. So it's a reorganization of the nuclear shell model. It's a reorganization of the nucleons, and
that's what I'm saying.
That does take energy, just like reorganization of the electrons. So if you have some, you imagine it's like a phosphor, you know. So you have invisible light, and you shine some light on this thing. Then you take it out of the light, and it glows for a couple hours afterwards. It's like a phosphor.
Yeah, but that's one that's decays because you've given it energy. What you're describing as a system where you've reorganized the nucleons to a point where they're actually more stable than they were in the unexcited state.
Right, which can happen due to the high nuclear.
And the description is normally you call it an excited state, but what you're actually doing is you're moving it into a new arrangement where it's less likely to fall apart.
Well, no, it has real additional energy in there.
No, I'm not saying it's not got real additional energy.
It's the same. So, I mean, you can make any radioisotope stable by removing or adding the right components. But yeah, it's an excited state, but it is more stable than the unexcited state.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So how would I describe this is you've got like a nucleon that's teetering on the edge of a step, right? And you're giving it extra energy. You're moving it forward in the overall vector up the energy ladder so that you're moving it further onto the stable platform so that it doesn't matter how much vibration you get, it's not going to actually fall off that step and become de-excited. So that's kind of like how I would visually describe it.
Yeah. I wanted to mention one thing. I got to go work on some stuff here in a minute, but I just wanted to mention something interesting about these EVOs that I just realized. I'm sure other people have realized this before as well. So EVOs, they're sort of quantized, but you can generate them at whatever size you want with various amounts of energy. So there's a continuum to them.